I always thought my life was ordinary. The forest outside my home was familiar, the scent of pine and wet earth a constant companion, the rustle of leaves and soft murmur of the river my quiet rhythm. I rose with the first silver streaks of dawn, stretching against the chill in the air, feeling the pulse of life beneath my paws as I moved through the morning mist. My routine was simple: gather herbs from the clearing near the stream, check on the younger pack members training under the watchful eyes of the alphas, and then return to my small den to rest before the evening hunt. Every day felt patterned, predictable, yet I never considered it dull. There was a comfort in the repetition, a safety in the familiar scents and paths, even if my heart occasionally ached with a quiet longing I could not name. Yet, even in this stillness, the world whispered to me. I sometimes felt it in the breeze brushing past the trees, carrying the faintest murmurs I could not quite catch. The shadows seemed to shift when I looked away, stretching a moment too long or bending in ways that made my fur prickle. At first, I brushed it off as imagination or the tricks of light through branches, but the feeling persisted, subtle and insistent, as though the forest itself was alive and observing me. And then, there were the small, inexplicable sensations, moments when I paused mid-step and shivered, sensing eyes on me when no one was there, or hearing my name whispered on the wind in a voice that was neither harsh nor familiar but somehow intimate, threading through the morning air like a secret meant only for me. It was during one such quiet morning, as the mist rose off the river and sparkled like scattered jewels in the sun, that I first became aware of him. I didn't see him outright, not at first, but the shadows shifted with intention at the far edge of the clearing. A sleek silhouette, too fluid to be ordinary, seemed to glide just beyond the line of my vision. My heart stuttered, a rush of instinct and fear entwined, yet I could not pull my gaze away. There, just a flash of green in the underbrush, was a single glowing eye, intense and knowing, staring at me. My pulse quickened, not with danger but with curiosity, a deep, unexplainable recognition. Even as I tried to convince myself that it was a trick of light, a reflection from the dew or a flicker in my mind, the feeling remained: someone, or something, was watching me. I continued my morning routines, trying to ignore the green eye that haunted my periphery. When I reached the clearing to gather herbs, I felt it again, a subtle brush of presence, a ripple across the air like the faint brush of fur against mine, though I saw nothing. I half smiled, shaking my head as if to dismiss the sensation. "You're imagining things," I whispered aloud, though my voice caught on the words, carrying in the still forest like a leaf dropped on glass. Yet the awareness lingered. I could feel him, a shadow, silent and deliberate, moving along the edges of the clearing without disturbing a single leaf, his green eye catching fragments of sunlight and shadow alike, watching my every movement with an intelligence that was both unnerving and mesmerizing. By midday, the forest hummed with life, the pack in motion around me, the younger wolves chasing each other with laughter and playful growls, the alphas commanding attention with their strong presence. I moved among them, a Luna quiet and observant, tending to minor injuries, checking the traps for prey, offering a comforting word or nudge where needed. Yet even in these ordinary interactions, I felt the green eye. I caught fleeting glimpses, a shadow sliding behind a tree, a ripple of movement in a corner of my vision, but when I turned, there was nothing. The sense of being observed was a constant thread, tugging at my awareness, threading tension into the otherwise familiar rhythm of my day. During the afternoon, I wandered toward the river to wash the herbs I had collected, letting the cool water swirl around my paws, the scent of moss and fresh rain filling the air. I knelt to submerge my hands and felt a sudden stillness wash over the clearing, as though the world itself had paused. Then I heard it, a soft rustle, more felt than heard, coming from the far bank. My ears pricked instinctively, my body tensing. The green eye glimmered in the shadows, watching. I wanted to call out, to confront the presence, but something held me back, a magnetic pull stronger than fear. And then, as I glanced once more at the rippling water, the feeling passed, leaving only the echo of his gaze in my mind and a whisper that seemed to come from nowhere yet everywhere: "Soon, Luna. Soon the threads will move." Evening approached, and the forest was bathed in golden light. The pack gathered near the den, exchanging stories, laughter, and the simple comforts of community. I lingered on the edge, feeling the warmth of family, yet the shadow lingered at the periphery of my vision. Dream, I thought, though I didn't know his name then, was more than a fleeting presence. He was a constant, a subtle force threading through my life, unseen but undeniably there. I wondered at his motives, at the purpose behind his silent vigilance. Was he an ally? A harbinger? Or something far more intricate, testing me before the moment I could understand what it was I needed to learn? As night fell, the moon rising like a silver sentinel above the trees, I returned to my den, weary but restless. The shadows lengthened, folding into the familiar shapes of the forest yet shifting just enough to unsettle me. I paused at the entrance, feeling the pull of something extraordinary stirring, a tremor running through the air, brushing against my senses in ways both frightening and thrilling. The wind carried a whisper, almost lost in the rustle of leaves, but I caught it clearly. The moment is near, Luna. Your world will change. I shivered, heart hammering, unsure whether from fear or anticipation. The forest seemed to lean in closer, listening, holding its breath with me, as if the unseen threads of fate were beginning to tug, pulling me forward toward a destiny I could not yet name. And somewhere, just beyond sight, Dream watched, his green eye glowing softly in the darkness, silent and immovable, a presence that promised both mystery and guidance. I did not know then whether he would protect me, challenge me, or change everything I thought I knew. But I felt it in my bones. My ordinary life was ending, and the extraordinary was about to begin. The days after the first glimpse of Dream were restless. I tried to carry on with my routines, moving among the pack, tending to the young wolves, and gathering herbs in the morning mist, yet I could no longer ignore the subtle shifts in the world around me. Small things began to feel off, though nothing could be named as danger. A path I had walked countless times would twist unexpectedly, leaves falling in patterns that seemed deliberate. The river, which usually whispered only its gentle currents, sometimes hummed with a note that resonated in my chest. And always, in these moments, I felt him, the shadow at the edge of my vision, sleek and silent, green eye glimmering in the corners where the sun dared not reach. It started with fleeting visions. I would glance into the forest, and for a heartbeat, I saw images overlaying reality, the pack moving differently, shadows stretched unnaturally, and sometimes Dream himself appearing at impossible angles, watching, waiting. Each vision faded almost as soon as I recognized it, leaving me questioning whether I had imagined it. Yet the chill along my spine, the rapid thrum of my heartbeat, told me otherwise. My instincts were sharpening in ways I could not explain. I noticed scents that had been invisible before, heard footsteps before the wolves themselves moved, and felt the pulse of the forest as though it were a living, breathing entity conspiring to guide me somewhere unseen. The most unsettling part was how Dream's presence manifested in the smallest, most cryptic ways. I could be kneeling near the riverbank, sorting herbs, when a glimmer of green light would ripple across the water, catching my eye but vanishing before I could pinpoint its source. Or I would pause mid-step during a hunt, certain of something behind me, and find only the faintest impression of paw prints in the underbrush, too large, too sleek to belong to any wolf I knew. Once, when a young pup became lost during a practice run, I had felt an invisible hand nudging me toward the right path, the rustle of leaves so precise it could only have been guided by someone with intent. And though no one else seemed aware, I knew in the marrow of my bones that Dream had been there, observing, testing, or perhaps steering events without ever stepping fully into the light. The pack went about their days unaware, bound by their own routines and hierarchy, yet I began to feel a distance growing between me and them, not from lack of loyalty but from perception. I could sense the subtle threads of tension that others overlooked, the unease in the alpha's posture during meetings, the fleeting glances between siblings, the unspoken hierarchies that shifted in moments of quiet. And always, the green eye, hidden but present, reminded me that something far larger was at play than simple pack dynamics. Every glance, every rustle, every whisper of wind felt like a message I had yet to decipher. One morning, I awoke to find the mist thicker than usual, hanging in the clearing like a veil over the earth. As I stepped outside my den, the scent of dew and moss mixed with something unfamiliar, metallic yet faintly sweet, a tang that prickled at my senses. I paused, ears straining, and caught a shadow moving across the underbrush. Dream. Just a flicker, his body perfectly still and fluid, one luminous green eye catching the dawn's first light. He did not approach, did not speak, yet I felt a pulse of understanding radiate through me, a silent acknowledgement of the changes stirring in my life. That day, even as I worked among the pack, helping train the younger wolves, I felt as if my every action was observed, analyzed, and perhaps nudged by him. I did not feel fear, exactly, but a heady mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and a strange exhilaration that left me both breathless and on edge. By afternoon, the forest itself seemed to hum with significance. I followed a faint trail toward the cliffs overlooking the valley, led less by conscious thought than by an instinct that had grown sharper since Dream's first appearance. The wind carried scents and sounds layered with meaning I could not yet interpret, yet I felt compelled to move forward, each paw step resonating with a rhythm that seemed ancient. There, in the heart of the clearing, a leaf drifted down in an impossible spiral, catching the light of the sun in a way that made it glimmer green for a single heartbeat. My breath caught. I knew without knowing why that this was a sign, a clue left not by chance but by design, an invitation to notice the invisible currents shaping my life. Later, as I returned to the pack, I began to notice the coincidences stacking unnaturally. A berry bush I had passed countless times suddenly bore fruit perfectly ripe, as though anticipating my need. A hidden burrow revealed itself along the path, its entrance neatly cleared by unseen hands. And in every moment, whether walking the familiar trails or listening to the distant call of the river, I felt the subtle, guiding presence of Dream. Sometimes I caught the faintest whisper, more felt than heard, a line of words carried on the wind, the threads tighten. Watch carefully. It was never loud or insistent, only enough to stir my curiosity, to make me aware that the ordinary world I had known was quietly bending toward something extraordinary. Nightfall brought both comfort and unease. The pack rested, the fireflies drifting like sparks in the shadowed trees, and I lingered at the edge of the clearing, tracing patterns in the stars and listening to the whispering leaves. The green eye appeared again, shining softly from the shadows, unblinking, unwavering. I felt a connection, though intangible, and a shiver ran down my spine. Something was approaching, a change that would ripple through both the pack and the forest, through my instincts and my very soul. Dream's presence had become a constant hum in the background of my awareness, a signal that I was no longer alone, that fate was no longer subtle. And then, as I settled into the quiet of my den, a single sensation made me pause, something that brushed against the edge of my mind like a promise, a pulse of energy that was neither wind nor movement, but something more profound, more ancient. My ears twitched, my fur prickling, and the forest itself seemed to lean closer, waiting, holding its breath. The green glow appeared once more, just beyond sight, a reminder that the world I had thought I knew was only the surface. Beneath it, unseen currents moved, threads pulling toward a destiny I could not yet name. And I understood, with a mix of awe and apprehension, that the ordinary world of my life was quietly slipping away, leaving me on the cusp of something remarkable, guided by the enigmatic wolf whose green eye had first caught me in the morning mist. The wind whispered again, carrying a final, subtle clue, "Soon, Luna, you will see what lies beyond." And in that moment, I felt the first tremor of a life that would never again be ordinary, a sense of wonder and unease intertwining, a quiet heartbeat of destiny echoing in the shadows where Dream waited, watching, always waiting. The morning air carried a tension I could not place. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of birdsong and rustling leaves quieted as though the world itself sensed the shift. I had been wandering near the high ridge, tracing the familiar paths that always brought me comfort, when a ripple of energy brushed against me, a presence unlike any I had felt before, sharp, commanding, and almost impossible to ignore. I froze, every sense alert, and then I saw him. He stepped from the mist like a figure born of shadow and light, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to pierce not just the forest but my very thoughts. His fur shimmered with an almost ethereal glow, as if touched by the moon itself, and his gaze was magnetic, pulling at something deep inside me I did not yet understand. My heartbeat quickened, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through my chest, part fear, part fascination. I tried to steady myself, to remind myself that I was a Luna, trained to observe, to remain calm, yet his presence undid the rules I had always lived by. As I studied him, I realized that he was not part of our pack, not any wolf I recognized from nearby territories. There was a supernatural quality to him, a tension that seemed to bend the air around him, and I felt my instincts vibrating with both warning and curiosity. Every nerve in my body urged me to run, to retreat into safety, yet another current tugged at me, demanding that I stay. And then, as if to underline the impossibility of this encounter, a subtle shift in the shadows signaled the presence I had learned to sense above all others. Dream was there. Not fully visible, not stepping into the clearing, but lurking at the edge of the light, green eye glowing faintly, watching. He did not move toward the stranger, nor did he speak aloud, yet I felt his intention as clearly as if he had whispered into my mind. "The path you trust may not be the one you walk," the voice came, low and steady, threading through the tension like a warning or perhaps a promise. My pulse surged, a rush of adrenaline mixed with unease, for Dream had never spoken to me so directly before. His words carried weight, a signal that this moment was a turning point, though what exactly it meant remained obscured in shadow. The stranger's gaze met mine, and I felt a pull that was at once terrifying and exhilarating. It was not merely attraction in the simple sense, it was recognition, as if he knew something about me before I knew it myself. My instincts told me to tread carefully, yet every fiber of my being ached to understand him, to step closer despite the uncertainty that danced like fire along my spine. His presence alone reshaped the familiar clearing, shifting its energy into something charged and dangerous, and I realized with sudden clarity that the ordinary rhythms of my life were gone, replaced by currents I could not yet navigate. I tried to speak, to greet him, but words failed me, leaving only a soft exhale that mingled with the mist. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that was both formal and intimate, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended. I caught a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision, Dream, again, a shadow among shadows, his green eye glimmering as if amused or wary, silently reminding me that nothing here was straightforward. I wondered if this stranger was friend or foe, protector or challenge, and the uncertainty only heightened the tension curling in my chest. As minutes stretched, the stranger took a single step forward, and the forest seemed to respond. Leaves quivered in his wake, the underbrush swayed, and a hush fell over even the smallest creatures. I sensed the power radiating from him, not aggressive, but undeniable, a force that demanded acknowledgement. My heart pounded not in fear, but in recognition that this figure had come to disrupt the order I had known, to test the very foundations of the pack, and to pull me into something larger than myself. Dream shifted closer, the shadow moving like water, yet he remained just outside the stranger's perception. His green eye fixed on me, then flickered toward the newcomer, and I felt the weight of his observation, an unspoken judgment threading through the clearing. I wondered if Dream trusted this stranger, or if he was issuing a silent warning, and the uncertainty made my pulse thrum even faster. The green eye glimmered, a tether to the unseen currents of fate, reminding me that the threads of destiny were already entwining around me, and that my choices in the coming moments would carry weight I could not yet measure. The stranger spoke, his voice low, melodic, carrying easily over the quiet forest, and my ears pricked with instinctual attention. His words were cryptic, yet they resonated deeply. The balance is fragile. Power is not given, it is claimed, and not all who appear lost remain so. My fur rose slightly, every instinct urging me to question, to probe, to understand. There was authority in his tone, yet no threat, and it left me suspended in a strange liminal space between awe and apprehension. Every sense in me screamed that this encounter would mark a turning point, and yet I could not decipher whether it was a blessing or a challenge, or both. I tried to move, to approach cautiously, but the stranger remained poised, a figure of stillness and controlled energy that seemed almost otherworldly. My gaze flicked to Dream, whose green eye burned faintly from the edge of the clearing, as though issuing one final, subtle warning. "Trust is a thread, not a chain," I imagined him saying, though the words were mine to interpret. And in that moment, I understood that nothing in this encounter was straightforward. Allegiances, motives, and intentions were cloaked, and my own instincts, honed through years of observing the forest and the pack, were only a partial map in a landscape that was shifting beneath my paws. The stranger tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that left me breathless, and for a heartbeat, I felt the pull of something I could not define, a connection, fragile yet magnetic, as if we had met before in a place beyond memory, beyond time. My mind raced, questions spilling into my consciousness, yet no words formed. I sensed my destiny brushing against the edge of the extraordinary, and I realized that Dream's presence was more than observation, it was guidance, a subtle thread pulling me toward decisions I could not yet fully comprehend. And then, just as silently as he had appeared, the stranger stepped back into the mist, leaving only the memory of his presence and the echo of power lingering in the air. The forest exhaled, and the ordinary noises returned, yet I felt altered, stretched along invisible currents that I could neither see nor touch. Dream emerged briefly, a shadow among shadows, green eye glowing softly, and for the first time, he seemed almost approving. The moment passed, yet the memory remained, a tension threading through my chest and a pull toward something larger, something unseen. I stayed in the clearing long after he vanished, heart still racing, senses alert, every shadow seeming alive with potential, every whisper of wind carrying a question I could not yet answer. The words I had imagined from Dream lingered, the path you trust may not be the one you walk. I knew that the encounter was only the beginning, that my life was shifting in ways I could not yet measure, and that the forest, the pack, and the enigmatic stranger had all become threads in a web I had no choice but to navigate. And somewhere, at the edge of perception, Dream waited, silently observing, green eye flickering like a star hidden behind clouds, a reminder that nothing was ever truly ordinary, and that the extraordinary was only just beginning. The forest no longer felt solid beneath my paws. Every step I took seemed to echo differently, the ground shifting in ways I could not explain, leaves rustling with messages I could not fully decipher. My dreams began to invade the edges of my waking world, carrying fragments of moments that had not yet happened, or perhaps had already passed in some other time I could not name. I would wake with the scent of rain on moss lingering in my fur, though no storm had touched the forest, or feel the brush of a paw against my shoulder when I was entirely alone. The line between ordinary and extraordinary blurred, and I realized that the rhythm I had always trusted, the predictable patterns of pack life, the familiar edges of the forest, was fracturing. Subtle signs began to ripple through my days, small enough that any other Luna might dismiss them, but impossible for me to ignore. A paw print appeared along a path I had walked just hours before, too large, sleek, and precise to belong to any known wolf. When I bent to examine it, the mist shifted, and for a fleeting heartbeat, I glimpsed green eyes glimmering in the shadows before they vanished entirely. A sudden gust of wind carried a whisper that made my fur rise. The threads are moving, Luna. Follow carefully. My heart leapt, and I realized that Dream's interventions were no longer occasional, they were shaping my reality, guiding me, warning me, testing me in ways I could not yet understand. Even my dreams seemed more urgent now, bleeding into the waking world with a strange fluidity. I would wake thinking I had seen the stranger again, or the pack in situations that had not yet occurred, only to find subtle evidence, a disturbed bush, a displaced stone, that confirmed my visions had been more than imagination. Every coincidence felt orchestrated, every chance encounter weighted with meaning I could barely comprehend. When I passed a familiar clearing, a single green glint flickered across the roots of an old oak, and I froze, remembering the shimmer in my dreams. It was Dream, I knew, though he remained hidden, a silent force threading my perception with riddles and warnings. The pack noticed little, absorbed in their daily routines, yet I felt a distance growing between us. I could no longer rely on the ordinary sense of security I had once known. Every glance between pack members carried multiple layers of intent, and every interaction felt pregnant with unseen consequences. I began to hesitate in small ways, pausing to read the shifting shadows, the currents of air, and the faint stirrings that seemed to signal both danger and revelation. The ordinary rituals, the hunting drills, the training exercises, the quiet moments by the river, were infused now with an intensity one could not ignore, as if every breath, every movement, was being watched and measured. Dream's presence became almost tactile, manifesting in the most subtle forms, a misplaced paw print on a trail I thought I knew, a glimmer of green light across the surface of the river, a whisper carried on the wind that seemed to call my name without uttering it aloud. Once, as I paused to examine a broken branch along a path, I felt a brush of warmth against my flank, too light for any known wolf, and entirely intentional. I spun, expecting to see him fully, but found only the empty forest. Yet I knew he had been there. Each of these moments made me more alert, more aware of currents in the forest I had never noticed, and more certain that the ordinary world I had once relied upon was slipping away. The emotional intensity of each day rose in ways that startled me. I felt more acutely the bonds between pack members, the subtle tension, the loyalty, the unspoken rivalries, and yet I also felt something deeper, threaded through every interaction, pulling at my heart in ways I could not yet name. My curiosity toward the stranger who had appeared days before grew, an ache mingled with trepidation, even as Dream's interventions reminded me that nothing was simple. Every time I tried to predict outcomes, the forest itself seemed to shift, rearranging details in ways that forced me to adapt, to trust instincts sharpened by Dream's guiding presence. One evening, as the moon rose high and painted the clearing silver, I ventured alone to a ridge overlooking the valley. The air was electric, charged with a force I could neither see nor name, and my pulse raced as though anticipating an event yet to come. I sensed a movement in the shadows, a flicker of green light that made my skin prickle. Dream emerged briefly, just at the edge of perception, his sleek, muscular form blending with the darkness. His single green eye gleamed with intensity, and I felt the weight of unspoken words pressing against me. For a moment, the forest fell silent, the night holding its breath. "Perception is a fragile thing, Luna," I imagined him whispering. "What you know is only the beginning." The realization hit me slowly, then all at once. The ordinary world, the forest, the pack, my familiar routines, was no longer a reliable measure of safety or certainty. Every step could carry unseen consequences, every sight or sound might be manipulated by forces I could not yet identify. Dream's subtle warnings were the only anchor I could grasp, a tether to the unseen currents moving through the forest and through my life. My dreams, my instincts, my waking senses, they were no longer separate, no longer distinct. They were threads woven together by a pattern I was only beginning to perceive, and the pattern pointed towards something far larger, something extraordinary and potentially dangerous. And then, at the edge of the clearing, I saw it, a single leaf suspended in midair, glowing faintly green as though illuminated from within. It hovered for a heartbeat, then drifted to the ground in a spiral that defied gravity, landing perfectly at the base of an ancient oak. I knew, without understanding how, that this was a signal, a clue, a confirmation that Dream's presence, and whatever force he represented, was not only real but shaping the very world around me. My pulse thundered in my ears as I knelt to touch the leaf, the glow fading beneath my fingertips, leaving a residual warmth that seemed to imprint on my very senses. The revelation was overwhelming. Everything I had taken for granted, safety, routine, familiarity, was now fragile. Every shadow could conceal intention, every wind might carry a message, every instinct was a guide to paths I had yet to walk. And yet, despite the fear, there was a thrill, a sense of possibility that made my heart soar. Dream was no longer just a shadow on the periphery, he was a guide, a puzzle, a force I could not ignore. And in that moment, I realized that my perception of the world, my understanding of the forest and the pack and even of myself, had been upended entirely. The night deepened, stars scattered across the sky, and I lingered on the ridge, feeling the currents of energy pulsing through the land. I sensed Dream watching, green eye glimmering like a distant beacon, and I understood, finally, that the ordinary was gone. In its place, a web of mysteries stretched before me, threads invisible yet palpable, tugging me toward a reality I could not yet name, toward a destiny shaped by forces beyond the comprehension of any Luna I had ever known. And as I descended the ridge, heart racing and senses alert, the wind carried a final, whispered confirmation: "What is safe is no longer yours, Luna. Step carefully, your world is shifting." The forest, once familiar and comforting, had become a labyrinth of possibility and danger, and somewhere, hidden in its shadows, Dream waited, green eye glimmering, silently guiding me toward a truth I had not yet imagined. The morning air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of dew and earth, yet there was a tension beneath the calm that I could not ignore. Today, the pack was to undergo a trial, a test of coordination, instinct, and the unspoken bonds that held us together. I felt the familiar pulse of anticipation in my chest, every nerve attuned to the rhythm of the forest, and a low, humming awareness that Dream was nearby, watching from the shadows, green eye glinting faintly, invisible yet undeniably present. I could feel him before I saw him, a subtle vibration in the air that made the hairs along my spine rise, a signal that this day would not unfold as any ordinary day had before. The stranger, the one whose presence had disrupted my sense of normal, was there as well, moving through the clearing with fluid grace. His eyes found mine across the gathering, and in that instant, a current passed between us, unspoken yet undeniable, a silent acknowledgement of shared purpose and understanding. My pause froze for a heartbeat, heart pounding, as I realized that trust did not need words to grow. It could exist in glances, in the alignment of breath, in the quiet awareness of another presence. Every instinct told me that he was not just a challenge or a threat, but someone, or something, that would shape my path, even as Dream observed from the periphery, his cryptic attention threading through every moment like an invisible tether. The trial began, a test of agility and intuition, and I moved alongside the stranger, our steps almost synchronized despite the lack of overt communication. I caught the way he adjusted to my pace, how his gaze flicked to subtle cues in the forest, and I realized that we were not simply participating in the same exercise, we were connected by something deeper, a rhythm that defied explanation. When a fallen branch threatened to trip me, a slight nudge in the air, a movement I could only interpret as Dream's influence, kept my balance steady, though I saw nothing. I knew then that every challenge, every test, was layered with guidance, both visible and invisible, and that the forest itself had become a living classroom in which I was learning not only skill, but trust and awareness. As we moved through the trial, moments of quiet intimacy grew between us. A shared glance when the stranger corrected a misstep, the subtle placement of a paw to indicate direction, the unspoken acknowledgement of timing and instinct, all of it wove a tapestry of understanding between us. I felt my pulse quicken, not in fear, but in recognition that connection could form in ways beyond words, that the heart and the mind could converse in silence as eloquently as any voice. Dream's presence lingered at the edge, a silent witness to these moments, green eye flashing briefly whenever the unspoken bond deepened, as if approving, cautioning, or simply reminding me that every interaction carried weight. The forest seemed to respond to our cooperation, obstacles shifting subtly in ways that favored intuition over brute force. A gap between rocks aligned perfectly for my leap, a tangled thicket parted just enough for a safe path, and I began to suspect that the trials themselves were not merely tests of skill, but instruments to reveal hidden truths about perception, trust, and the unseen threads that connected us all. The stranger moved beside me with a quiet awareness that mirrored my own, and I found myself relying on instincts I hadn't known I possessed, guided not only by the lessons of the pack but by a resonance that seemed to emanate from him, amplified by Dream's cryptic influence at the edges of my awareness. By midday, sweat mingled with the scent of earth and pine, and the trial had taken us deeper into the heart of the forest than any of us had ventured before. In a pause between obstacles, the stranger glanced at me, and for a heartbeat, his eyes held a depth I could not name, curiosity, caution, understanding, and something far more personal. I met his gaze, and the forest seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of us in a space suspended between reality and the unseen currents threading through the trees. I realized then that our bond was forming not through force or words, but through shared vulnerability, a trust forged in the crucible of challenge, and tempered by the quiet awareness that we were not alone in the forest. Dream's influence became more pronounced in these quiet moments. A fallen leaf, its veins catching the sunlight in a pattern almost deliberate, drifted across our path, a silent marker pointing toward the next step. A faint rustle of leaves, a shift in the wind, carried a whisper that brushed against my consciousness: observe, learn, trust, but question everything. The voice was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it carried a weight that made my heart beat faster, a reminder that guidance and uncertainty often walked hand in hand, and that the extraordinary threads weaving through my life were not yet fully revealed. As the trial progressed, an unexpected emotional shift swept over me. We came upon a clearing marked by ancient stones, their surfaces etched with the symbols of past lunas and alphas, and I felt a memory surface that I had long forgotten, a recollection of my earliest days in the pack, of moments when I had felt small, unsure, and yet watched over by unseen forces. The memory was vivid, almost tangible, as if the forest itself had awakened it, and I realized that trust and courage were not only skills to be learned but legacies inherited, threads passed through time and now entwined with my own path. The stranger's presence beside me intensified the feeling, his silent awareness matching my own emotional resonance, as though he understood the significance of the memory without a word. The final stage of the trial required cooperation to cross a narrow cliffside path, where missteps could mean injury, though no true danger threatened us beyond the lesson of balance and instinct. Our paws moved in near-perfect synchronization, our focus shared, and I felt the bond deepen with each careful step. At the edge, the stranger paused, glancing at me with a gaze that conveyed trust, respect, and the unspoken acknowledgement that we had navigated more than just obstacles. We had traversed the terrain of intuition, emotion, and mutual understanding. Dream lingered nearby, a shadow in the distance, green eye glowing faintly as if approving of the subtle connection forming between us while reminding me that even bonds tested in this way were only a step along the larger path. And then, as the trial concluded and the forest exhaled its quiet sigh of relief, an unexpected revelation struck me. In the clearing, where shadows stretched long and the afternoon sun slanted through the trees, I saw an image flash across the stones, an imprint of a past Luna, a mirror of myself, and suddenly I remembered a lesson long forgotten, that trust was fragile, and connection could unlock truths buried deep within. My heart raced as I realized that the emotional bond forming with the stranger was not simply companionship or alliance, it had awakened a latent awareness in me, a sense of potential and insight that I had never fully acknowledged. Dream's subtle markers, the leaf, the rustle of wind, the flicker of green, had guided me to this moment, and the depth of what I had learned settled over me like a tide. As the pack returned to familiar paths, my pulse still quickened, my senses attuned to every movement and sound. The forest seemed transformed, each tree and shadow alive with hidden meaning, and the stranger's presence remained etched in my awareness, a reminder that connection and understanding could be forged in silence and subtlety. Dream emerged briefly at the edge of the clearing, green eye flashing with cryptic approval, before melting back into the shadows. I realized then that the trials had not only tested skill and instinct but had drawn forth an emotional truth, a recognition that trust, intuition, and perception were intertwined in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. The memory, the bond, and the awareness of Dream's presence left me with a lingering realization. The ordinary world I had known was giving way to something far greater, a web of interwoven destinies, unseen forces, and emotional truths that would guide every step I took from this day onward. And though I did not yet know what challenges lay ahead, I understood that the connections I had formed, and the guidance I had sensed, were already shaping the path I was destined to follow, a path threaded with mystery, trust, and the quiet, enigmatic presence of the wolf who had become my constant shadow. The forest had grown quieter, heavier, as though it held its breath in anticipation of revelation. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, scattering gold and green across the undergrowth, yet the usual comfort of routine felt distant, replaced by a restless energy I could not shake. My paws carried me deeper into the territory than ever before, drawn by something I could not name, a resonance in the air, faint and elusive, calling me toward a place layered with memory, shadow, and meaning. Dream was there, of course, just at the periphery, his sleek form blending seamlessly with the darkness, green eye glimmering with cryptic intent. I felt his presence as tangibly as the pulse of my own heartbeat, a reminder that I was being guided, watched, and tested, though the purpose was not yet clear. The pack had left me behind, their routines and chatter fading into the distance, leaving only the forest and the subtle currents of energy that seemed to thread through the trees. My instincts pulled me toward an ancient grove, one I had only glimpsed in fleeting visions, yet now felt achingly familiar. The earth beneath my paws was soft, moss clinging to the roots of towering oaks, and the air carried scents layered with age and mystery, hints of things long forgotten but not erased. I paused at the edge of the grove, catching sight of a stone circle half hidden by ivy, worn smooth by the passage of time and countless footsteps of Lunas and Alphas before me. My pulse quickened. I knew instinctively that this place held truths I had been ready to uncover, truths that would reshape the boundaries of my ordinary life. Dream stepped silently from the shadows, emerging just long enough for his green eye to catch the morning light. He did not speak, yet I felt the weight of his presence like a hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward understanding without ever forcing my path. A soft rustle carried through the air, almost imperceptible, and I realized that the stone circle bore markings I had never noticed, runes and symbols etched into the surface, telling a story of bonds older than any memory in the pack, of destinies intertwined in ways I could not yet name. I knelt, tracing the carvings with my paw, feeling an energy pulse beneath them, and in that instant, the forest seemed to exhale, holding its breath as if acknowledging that the threads of fate were being observed and honored. I had always believed my pack's history was straightforward, linear, bounded by the rules and rituals that shaped daily life. Yet here, in this grove, I began to perceive a web of connections far more intricate. The markings hinted at a prophecy, one that spoke of a Luna whose instincts would awaken to guide the pack through shadow and uncertainty, and of an Alpha whose presence would challenge, protect, and illuminate the path. I felt a shiver run through me as the implications settled in my mind. The stranger whose presence had stirred my curiosity and pulled at my instincts might not be merely a visitor, but a key figure in the unfolding of the prophecy itself. My heartbeat quickened at the thought, part anticipation, part fear, as I realized that the threads of my life were being pulled toward a destiny far beyond the ordinary rhythms I had known. A sudden flicker of movement caught my eye at the edge of the grove, and Dream's voice, or perhaps the echo of his influence, whispered softly in my mind, "History is never truly buried, Luna. Look beneath what you know, and the unseen will reveal itself." I glanced toward the shadows, green eye glimmering faintly, and understood that he was pointing me toward a detail I had overlooked, the placement of the stones, the alignment of the markings, the subtle cues that suggested patterns repeating across generations. It was a map of memory, a guide to perception, and I realized that Dream had been nudging me, shaping my awareness in ways that had always seemed subtle but were now undeniable. I followed the invisible cues, tracing patterns along the stones, and as I did, a memory surfaced, one I had buried deep, forgotten in the mundane hum of daily pack life. I saw a younger version of myself, small and uncertain, stepping into the forest alone, guided by instincts I did not yet understand, and sensed an unseen presence watching, protecting, and teaching. It was Dream, though I had not known him then, his green eye a beacon in the shadows, shaping my path without revealing himself fully. The memory collided with the markings in the stone circle, revealing a connection between past and present, prophecy and instinct, that I had never imagined. My breath caught, awareness expanding as the forest seemed to lean in closer, attentive, alive. The revelation deepened as I noticed another subtle pattern. The stranger I had met days before, whose presence had drawn me with magnetic force, was connected to these ancient threads. The prophecy hinted that the Luna and the Alpha were bound not only by leadership but by destiny, that their awareness and cooperation would shape the survival, growth, and evolution of the pack in ways beyond comprehension. Every instinct in me resonated with this truth, yet fear threaded through the excitement, for the weight of such a bond demanded responsibility and awareness I was only beginning to grasp. Dream's green eye glimmered from the shadows, as if silently approving, reminding me that guidance often required observation and patience, and that the steps I took now would echo far beyond the grove. I lingered at the center of the stones, feeling the energy pulse beneath my paws, and suddenly the air shimmered faintly, carrying a whisper that was neither wind nor sound but something felt in the marrow of my bones. The past shapes the future, but choice defines the path. Choose wisely, Luna. I shivered, the message threading through my consciousness, a confirmation that the discoveries here were not mere history but active forces shaping every movement, decision, and bond one would encounter. My heart raced as I realized that the ordinary life I had known, the quiet rhythms, the predictable interactions, the sense of safety, was no longer a reliable measure of what was real or true. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the grove, I noticed a final, astonishing detail. Hidden among the ivy at the base of the central stone, a small indentation contained a relic I had never seen before, carved with a symbol I instinctively recognized as tied to both Dream and the stranger. It was a sign of connection, a marker of alliance and trust, and in that moment, the pieces of history, prophecy, and present tension coalesced into a shocking clarity. The stranger was not a visitor, the trials were not arbitrary, and Dream's subtle interventions were more than guidance. They were shaping my understanding of destiny itself. My breath caught, my senses alert, as the forest seemed to pulse with the revelation. I realized that my perception of safety, of what was familiar and trustworthy, had been upended entirely. Everything I had known, the pack, the forest, my own instincts, was now threaded into a web far larger, more intricate, and far more consequential than I could have imagined. And somewhere in the shadows, Dream watched, green eye glimmering, silent and unreadable, a reminder that the journey ahead would demand awareness, courage, and an understanding of connections hidden beneath the surface. With the last light fading through the canopy, I left the grove, my mind racing, heart pounding, and every sense attuned to the subtle currents of energy threading through the forest. I had uncovered truths long buried, discovered the ties binding me to the stranger and to Dream, and felt the weight of a destiny I could not yet fully grasp. And though fear threaded through excitement, a sense of clarity settled in my chest. The ordinary world had ended, replaced by a reality shaped by history, prophecy, and the silent, enigmatic presence of the wolf whose green eye had guided me to this moment. The forest no longer felt familiar. The wind carried whispers I could not trace, and the trees themselves seemed to lean closer, shifting as if the very earth were unsettled. The morning began as ordinary, the pack moving through drills and exercises, yet a tension had taken hold, invisible but undeniable. My instincts prickled with anticipation, and I could sense currents of energy threading through the air, bending reality in subtle ways. A path that should have been clear twisted unexpectedly, a rock dislodged where none had been before, and every shadow seemed alive with the possibility of misstep. I realized, with a weight settling in my chest, that the world I had known, the forest, the pack, even my own routines, was fragmenting under forces I could not yet name. The stranger appeared as I moved through the clearing, tall and composed, his eyes carrying the quiet strength of someone, or something, aware of these subtle shifts in reality. I felt the pull of connection instantly, tempered by the gnawing tension of uncertainty. His gaze held both reassurance and challenge, as though he knew the path I must walk but could not dictate the steps. And then, from the edges of perception, I sensed Dream, shadowed and unreadable, green eye flickering in the light like a beacon or a warning. I felt his presence as a low hum in the air, a subtle vibration in my senses, as though he were testing me, observing my choices, and reminding me that every decision carried consequences I could not yet measure. By mid-morning, the instability revealed itself more clearly. A section of the forest that had always been safe, a familiar ridge in the stream below, was suddenly transformed. Trees had shifted, roots twisted like intricate patterns, and the water, normally steady, moved with an odd turbulence, reflecting the sun in fractured patterns. The pack hesitated, instinctively alert to danger, yet I could see the uncertainty mirrored in their eyes. Something was at work here that was not entirely natural, a force threading through the ordinary with invisible hands, testing every decision, every instinct. I sensed that the trials I had faced before were mere preparation, and that now, the forest itself was teaching lessons I had not yet imagined. The stranger moved beside me, silent and composed, yet I could feel the weight of his awareness pressing against my consciousness. Every glance, every adjustment in pace, every subtle gesture communicated guidance without words. I realized that trust would be essential, yet incomplete, for I could not rely solely on him. The forest demanded more: perception, instinct, courage, and discernment. And then, a flicker of green from the shadows reminded me that Dream was near, observing, leaving markers, a misplaced paw print here, a glimmer of light there, a subtle adjustment in the wind that spoke to intuition rather than instruction. He did not intervene directly, but the pressure of his presence was enough to make every choice feel consequential. As the day progressed, the moral and emotional dilemmas began to multiply. A young wolf, eager but reckless, darted toward a precarious ledge where the ground had shifted, and instinct screamed at me to act. Yet another path called, one that might avert danger for the pack as a whole but left the pup vulnerable. I froze, torn between duty, instinct, and the weight of responsibility I had never felt so acutely. The stranger's eyes met mine, conveying understanding and caution, while Dream's green eye flickered from the shadows, almost imperceptible but heavy with intent. I realized then that I would have to choose, not merely react, and that every decision would reverberate far beyond this moment. I took a breath, listening to the subtle currents of the forest, the low rustle of leaves, the pulse of wind, and the quiet heartbeat of the stream below. I felt the pup's hesitation, the tension in the stranger beside me, and the cryptic guidance of Dream, whose presence threaded through the space like an invisible tether. Carefully, I moved to intercept, positioning myself so that both the young wolf and the shifting ground could be navigated safely. Each paw step was deliberate, conscious, every movement guided by instinct sharpened by previous trials, yet tempered by awareness of unseen forces. I felt the strain in my chest, the adrenaline, the moral weight of every action, and yet I knew hesitation would risk more than any misstep. The forest responded subtly, almost imperceptibly. A branch shifted, creating a path, the stream's turbulence eased slightly, and the pup's movements aligned with mine, as though the very environment acknowledged the careful balance of action and awareness. I realized that my perception, my instincts, and my ability to read the currents of both the forest and the pack were becoming a single, integrated force, one that allowed me to navigate danger with intuition rather than brute force. Yet the realization brought no comfort, only the understanding that the stakes were higher than ever, and that the fragility of this balance could be shattered at any moment. By afternoon, the instability of the forest escalated further. A gust of wind, unusually strong and oddly timed, pushed through the clearing, scattering leaves and branches. My senses screamed, the hairs on my neck rising as I realized that the forest itself seemed to be testing us, probing for weaknesses in perception and resolve. The stranger remained close, moving with me, his presence a quiet anchor against the surging uncertainty. And Dream, always present yet never fully visible, left his subtle markers, a flash of green light along the path, a rustle of leaves in a pattern that drew my attention to hidden hazards, reminding me that guidance often came without clarity, that vigilance was my only ally. The pivotal moment arrived as we approached the cliff overlooking the valley, a place I had traversed safely many times before. The ground trembled slightly underfoot, a minor quake or something unnatural, I could not tell, yet it was enough to force immediate decisions. A group of younger wolves froze, hesitant, some pawing at the edge nervously. The stranger and I exchanged a glance, a wordless acknowledgement that responsibility rested on my shoulders, yet the presence of Dream reminded me that perception must guide action as much as courage. I felt the tension coil in my chest like a living thing, every sense on high alert. I had to choose, move the pack to the safer but longer route, delaying our progress and risking exposure to unknown instability, or navigate the shorter path with precision and trust in my instincts and the guidance subtly provided by Dream. Heart pounding, I inhaled the forest scent, feeling the pulse of wind and earth, noting every subtle shift in branch, leaf, and stone. The stranger's presence beside me offered reassurance, yet he did not interfere, allowing me to own the choice. And then, a flash of green in the shadowed underbrush caught my eye, Dream's cryptic intervention, a final signal that the unseen currents were aligned with my intuition. I made the decision to lead the pack along the shorter path, relying on heightened awareness, trust, and subtle guidance. Each step was deliberate, the younger wolves following my lead, their trust in me palpable, and every minor tremor or shift met with anticipation and adaptation. We moved as a single unit, tension coiling and uncoiling in rhythm with the forest itself, and I realized that my understanding of leadership, perception, and destiny had deepened immeasurably. The cliff's edge loomed, but each paw step was anchored in instinct, awareness, and the subtle threads of guidance threading through the clearing. As we reached safety, hearts pounding, muscles trembling from tension, I understood the weight of what had just transpired. The forest had tested us, the pack had relied on my choices, and the stranger had silently affirmed the connection between intuition and trust. Dream remained in the shadows, green eye flickering briefly before disappearing entirely, leaving me with the realization that guidance could be present yet invisible, and that the extraordinary forces threading through the forest demanded vigilance, courage, and moral clarity. And as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the trees in golden shadow, I knew the world was no longer stable. Choices carried consequences, perceptions could be deceived, and the currents shaping destiny were moving faster than ever. I felt the weight of responsibility settle in my chest and understood that the next steps, whatever they might be, would demand decisiveness, awareness, and courage beyond anything I had yet experienced. The forest whispered, the pack watched, and Dream's green eye glimmered one final time from the shadows, a reminder that every decision would matter, and that the rising conflict was only the beginning. The forest felt heavier that evening, shadows stretching long and the wind carrying an almost tangible weight, as if it, too, were aware of the truths I had yet to face. My paws moved slowly along the familiar trails, but familiarity offered no comfort. Each step stirred memories, echoes of choices and fears I had buried beneath the routines of pack life. I felt the pull of my own past, the hidden layers of myself that had long remained untouched, and realized that the challenges of the forest and the presence of the stranger had begun to pry open doors I had kept closed for my own safety. I shivered as the sun dipped low, painting the canopy in golden shadow, and knew that tonight would reveal more than the forest ever had before. Dream appeared first, silent as always, his sleek form melting from the shadows into the periphery of my vision. The single green eye glimmered faintly, reflecting the fading light, and I felt the weight of his attention pressing against my instincts. He did not move closer, did not intervene directly, but his presence carried meaning, a reminder that observation alone could guide, that subtle influence often spoke louder than action. I shivered at the awareness, a mixture of reassurance and unease, knowing that the path forward was being watched by forces I could not fully understand. The stranger moved beside me without a sound, his presence steadying yet provocative in ways I could not name. We walked in silence, and in that quiet, I felt the threads of unspoken understanding weaving between us. His gaze occasionally flicked to me, curious and perceptive, and I realized that he, too, carried truths untold, secrets hidden beneath the calm surface of composure. I sensed the weight of his past, the choices that had shaped him, and the care with which he navigated the world. Each glance felt layered with meaning, and I understood that emotional depth, like instinct, could be shared silently, woven into moments that required no words to convey trust, caution, or connection. The pack emerged from the underbrush behind us, moving as a unit yet carrying their own undercurrents of emotion. Some followed eagerly, others hesitated, uncertainty or loyalty warring in their eyes. I could see the hidden histories threaded through their expressions, rivalries, doubts, quiet attachments, and fears unspoken. Each wolf carried a layer of story beneath the surface, and I realized that my understanding of the pack, and of leadership itself, required seeing these truths without judgment, integrating awareness of their inner worlds into every choice I would make. Even the smallest paw step could ripple through bonds delicate as spun silk, altering relationships without visible consequence. A sudden gust rustled the leaves above, and I caught a glimmer of green light, a signal from Dream. I paused, heart-catching, sensing a message I could not yet decipher. The shadows shifted, and I imagined his cryptic line threading through my consciousness. Fear is a guide, Luna. Desire is a map. See both, and you will find the hidden path. The words, or perhaps the suggestion of words, pressed against my thoughts, stirring memories I had long ignored, moments of vulnerability, choices made out of fear or longing, the loneliness I had buried beneath discipline and routine. I realized that the forest, the pack, the stranger, and Dream were all entwined with my own inner truth, and that facing one required confronting the other. As we moved deeper, I felt the weight of a specific memory surface, one I had pushed aside as insignificant, yet now pulsing with relevance. A night long ago, I had stumbled into the forest alone, searching for a sense of belonging I did not yet understand. A shadow had watched me then, unseen but present, and though I had dismissed it at the time, I now recognized the pattern, the subtle influence of dream, guiding me toward intuition and resilience before I had the language to name it. The memory rippled into the present, intertwining with my awareness of the stranger and the pack, and I realized that the emotional threads weaving through my life were far older and more intricate than I had imagined. The stranger's presence became a mirror to my own internal currents. His gaze, calm yet probing, invited recognition without intrusion, and I felt the pull of connection deepen. There were moments when his past, hinted at through expression and silence, aligned with mine in ways that left me breathless, sensing layers of trust, vulnerability, and shared understanding. The forest, attentive and almost sentient, seemed to lean in closer as if acknowledging the significance of these unspoken bonds. I realized then that emotional intimacy was not confined to touch or words but could exist in the alignment of awareness, in the careful observation of instinct and response, and in the shared navigation of challenge and uncertainty. Suddenly, a subtle disruption drew my attention, a small object at the base of an old oak, half hidden in moss. I approached, curious, and discovered a carved token I did not recognize, yet it carried an energy that resonated deep within me. The markings suggested a history linked to both the pack and the stranger, a secret layer of connection that had remained hidden until now. My pulse raced as I traced the edges with a careful paw, feeling the warmth of significance beneath my touch. Dream's green eye flickered briefly from the shadows, almost approving, almost cautionary, and I sensed that this discovery was not merely coincidence but a deliberate unveiling of threads I had not yet noticed. The weight of emotion pressed in as I realized the implications, the pack's history, the stranger's presence, my own instincts, and Dream's guidance were all interconnected. Fear, desire, trust, and uncertainty coalesced into a current that demanded recognition. I saw the quiet struggles of my packmates mirrored in my own reflection, the unspoken tensions, the small acts of courage, the bonds forged silently through loyalty and observation. And in that moment, I felt the delicate balance of leadership, intuition, and emotional depth pressing upon me, shaping choices that would ripple beyond the forest and beyond the moment. As twilight fell, painting the canopy in dusky violet and gold, an emotional twist struck me with the force of revelation. One of the pack's youngest wolves, who had long seemed timid and unsure, approached silently, pawing at the edge of the moss-covered clearing. In a hesitant voice, the wolf revealed a truth that had been hidden, a fear, a memory, a bond long unspoken, that altered the perception of loyalty and vulnerability in ways I had not anticipated. The confession tugged at my heart, intertwining with my own vulnerabilities, and I realized that emotional honesty, even in the smallest form, could reshape the currents of trust and understanding within the pack. The stranger remained nearby, silent yet profoundly present, and I sensed that his understanding of these dynamics extended beyond instinct into empathy. Dream lingered at the edge, green eye flashing once more, leaving a final, subtle mark on the unfolding moment. I felt the weight of the forest's attention, the pack's awareness, and my own emotional currents converging, and understood that this evening had revealed far more than secrets. It had illuminated the complexity of bonds, the power of vulnerability, and the hidden threads connecting every heart in the clearing. And as the stars emerged above, scattered across the sky like shards of light, I realized that the forest had deepened my understanding of myself, of the pack, and of the stranger whose presence now intertwined with my own. Dreams, instincts, secrets, and connections pulsed together, threading through every shadow, every glimmer, every silent movement. The revelation lingered in my chest, a mixture of awe, empathy, and trepidation, leaving me aware that the emotional depths explored tonight were only the beginning, and that every secret, every bond, and every guiding presence, especially Dream, would shape the decisions, trials, and mysteries that awaited in the days to come, the days that followed blurred into a haze of tension and uncertainty. The forest, once alive with whispers of guidance, now pulsed with unease. The trees groaned under unseen pressure, the air crackled with energy that felt almost volatile, and even the wind carried fragments of voices, half warnings, half memories. I could sense the pack fracturing beneath the weight of invisible forces, their trust in one another thinning like frost under morning light. Every glance carried suspicion, every silence felt loaded with doubt. And in the midst of it all, I felt Dream's unseen gaze like a current beneath my skin, steady, watchful, omnipresent. His green eye flickered now and then from the shadows, neither comfort nor threat, but a reminder that the unseen threads of destiny were tightening around us all. The stranger's presence had once steadied me, but now even that certainty began to waver. He moved with the same calm precision, spoke with the same quiet strength, yet something in his eyes had shifted, an unspoken distance, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. I wanted to trust him, part of me did, instinctively, yet another part whispered caution, echoing Dream's cryptic advice, "The path you trust may not be the one you walk." The words haunted me. They threaded through my thoughts each time I looked into the stranger's eyes and saw something I could not name, sorrow, perhaps, or guilt. It gnawed at me, that sense of not knowing. The pack's unease grew more tangible with every passing sunrise. Strange occurrences multiplied, food caches disturbed, paths that once led safely through the woods now twisted back upon themselves. Some swore they saw glowing lights flitting through the trees at night, others whispered of voices calling their names in the darkness. Fear began to outweigh faith. Even the bravest among us lowered their heads when the winds shifted, as if afraid of what might answer. I did what I could to hold them together, to keep our unity intact, but their doubts infected me too, creeping into my chest like a chill that refused to leave. Dream's interventions became sharper, more deliberate. A trail of paw prints where none should be. A leaf falling in perfect stillness, glowing faintly green before fading to brown. A low hum beneath the wind, repeating my name as though urging me to listen more closely. I began to notice patterns. Each time tension reached its breaking point, a sign appeared. Sometimes it calmed us, sometimes it deepened our uncertainty, as though Dream were both testing and protecting us, forcing growth through confusion. Once, when two of the younger wolves argued, their voices rising to the edge of violence, a sudden gust of wind cut through the clearing, scattering leaves in a spiral that glowed faintly green. Both froze mid-motion, their anger dissolving into silence. I caught Dream's outline at the edge of the trees, watching, unreadable. His control over chaos frightened me as much as it reassured me. Then came the day of the storm. The sky darkened without warning, clouds gathering with unnatural speed, the first peal of thunder rolling like an ancient growl through the forest. The pack clustered together, nervous and restless. The stranger stood apart, scanning the horizon, tension visible in every line of his body. I moved to stand beside him, drawn by both instinct and responsibility. "It's not just weather," I whispered. He nodded, jaw tight. "No. The forest reacts to something deeper. Something we've disturbed." His voice was low but certain, carrying an undertone that made my fur bristle. The weight of his words pressed heavy against my heart. Had our actions, our curiosity, our choices triggered this unrest? As the storm intensified, lightning fractured the sky in greenish streaks that made my breath catch. Green, Dream's color. His presence was everywhere now, in the flash of light, in the tremor beneath the soil, in the instinct that told me to stay alert. I could feel him manipulating the edges of events, not to harm, but to reveal, as if guiding us through a lesson we were unwilling to learn. The stranger turned to me suddenly, his eyes intense. "If this is what I think it is," he said quietly, "we're running out of time to decide who we trust." His gaze lingered, searching, perhaps for my faith, perhaps for forgiveness for something he hadn't yet confessed. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but the ground shuddered violently beneath us, splitting the words from my tongue. Chaos erupted. Trees splintered, roots tore through the soil, and the pack scattered in instinctive panic. I called out, voice swallowed by thunder. The stranger lunged toward me, steadying me as the earth cracked near my paws. For a heartbeat, his touch anchored me in the storm, but then his eyes shifted, wide with alarm, fixed on something behind me. I turned, just in time to see a shadow surge across the clearing, massive, formless, alive with the same green hue that haunted Dream's presence. It wasn't him, yet it was an echo, an extension, something born of the same energy. The air vibrated with power as the apparition coiled, then dissipated in a burst of light that left the ground steaming and the pack howling in fear. When the world stilled, only the sound of rain remained. My heart pounded. Around us, wolves emerged slowly from hiding, eyes wide with shock. The stranger's chest rose and fell heavily, his fur singed along the edges. He looked at me, and in his gaze I saw not triumph, but devastation. "He's warning us," he murmured. "But of what?" Before I could answer, a voice brushed against my mind, not loud, not spoken, but felt. "Trust bends before it breaks, Luna. Choose which way it bends." Dream's tone was softer than thunder but carried more force than any roar. I froze, shivering as I realized he was not merely observing anymore, he was drawing us toward a decision that would shape everything. That night, silence fell heavier than the storm had. The pack slept uneasily, scattered in small groups, each wolf wary of shadows. The stranger kept watch near the edge of the clearing, gaze distant, as though seeing something beyond the visible. I approached quietly, the damp earth cold beneath my paws. "You knew this would happen," I said softly. He didn't look at me. "Not like this," he replied, voice low. "But Dream, he doesn't act without purpose. Whatever's coming, he wants us divided, or prepared." His uncertainty cut through me like a blade. For the first time, I questioned whether his presence was protection or distraction. Before dawn, I woke to find the stranger gone. His scent lingered faintly in the mist, leading away from camp toward the deeper woods. Panic surged. I followed the trail, heart pounding, until I reached the ridge where the forest opened into mist and shadow. There, on the ground before me, lay a single sign, a paw print pressed deep into the soil, larger than any ordinary wolf's, glowing faintly green. Dream's mark. The air hummed with his silent message, cold and familiar. He walks his path now. You walk yours. I turned toward the trees, calling the stranger's name, but the forest gave no answer. The wind rose instead, carrying with it the echo of a howl, his, distant and fading, cut short by something I could not see. My chest tightened, fear and defiance warring in my veins. Dream's presence pulsed nearby, steady and watchful, but offered no comfort this time, only the knowledge that separation had been inevitable. The pack would look to me now. The forest would demand choices I was not ready to make. And as dawn broke in fractured light through the mist, I stood alone on the ridge, the green glow fading into the rising sun, realizing that the balance between trust and betrayal had already shifted, and that whatever came next, Dream had set it in motion. The morning broke unnaturally still, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until even your heartbeat feels intrusive. The forest, once alive with breath and motion, now stood frozen, as though waiting. My pack huddled close, their eyes restless, their bodies tense. The stranger had not returned, and though no one said his name aloud, his absence lingered in every look, every uncertain pause. The storm had left behind more than fallen branches and muddied earth, it had left questions, heavy as stones. And in that silence, I felt Dream before I saw him, an unseen pulse in the air, a quiet hum that vibrated beneath my skin like the promise of consequence. His green eye flickered in the mist ahead, faint but unmistakable. The world itself seemed to align around that single light. I rose, the pack's murmurs fading behind me as I stepped toward the tree-line. My paws sank into the damp soil, the scent of rain and moss thick in the air. Dream's presence deepened with each step, not physical but pervasive, a weight that filled every empty space between heartbeats. When I reached the clearing, he was there, not entirely solid, his form rippling between shadow and substance, as if even reality strained to contain him. His gaze fixed on me, calm, patient, and utterly certain. The choice approaches, the voice came, not spoken, but resonating through the forest and my thoughts alike. One path binds, one path breaks. You must know which you walk. His tone held no threat, only inevitability, and yet the words coiled inside me with dread. Before I could respond, the air shifted, the forest exhaled, and the stranger emerged from the mist. His eyes were weary, his fur damp, his expression torn between relief and regret. My heart stuttered at the sight of him, torn by the surge of conflicting emotion, trust and doubt, loyalty and fear, all entangled in the same fragile breath. He stopped a few paces away, his gaze flickering toward Dream before returning to me. "You shouldn't have followed me," he said quietly, voice rough with exhaustion. "This isn't your burden." I shook my head. "Everything that touches this pack touches me." I paused, studying him. "Where have you been?" His silence stretched long enough for the forest to whisper in his place. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of revelation. "Dream led me here, to the old boundary. I've seen what's coming, Luna. The balance he protects, it's breaking. The choices we've made have shifted the forest itself." He looked down, almost ashamed. "The fault may be mine." The air thickened with tension, the space between us charged with meaning. Dream's green eye glimmered brighter, catching both of us in its light. "No fault," he murmured through thought rather than voice, "only consequence." The forest echoed the sentiment, a ripple of wind stirring the leaves like agreement. I turned toward him, frustration bubbling beneath my calm. "Then guide us," I said, almost pleading. "Tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this." Dream's expression, or what passed for one, shifted slightly, the faintest tilt of his head. "Fix," he repeated softly. "There is no fixing what must change. There is only choosing." The words hit like thunder, their truth undeniable. The pack's faith was fracturing, the stranger's loyalty was uncertain, and even my own instincts wavered between reason and emotion. I had been walking in trust of unseen threads, yet now they tangled around me like vines, pulling in opposing directions. I looked from Dream to the stranger, feeling the weight of decision settle on my shoulders like a physical burden. "Then tell me," I demanded, voice trembling. "What am I choosing between?" Dream's green eye dimmed slightly, as though retreating. "Between safety and truth. Between loyalty and freedom. Between what was written, and what can still be rewritten." Before I could speak again, the ground beneath us trembled. The trees shuddered, their branches twisting toward the sky, and a deep rumble rolled through the earth. The pack cried out in the distance. I turned sharply, senses screaming that something was wrong. The stranger stepped forward, instinctively shielding me with his body as the trembling intensified. "He's forcing it," he said through clenched teeth. "Dream is pushing the balance to the edge, to see what we'll do." Dream did not deny it. His form pulsed, flickering brighter, his presence now radiating power that felt both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "The forest remembers," he said. "And it demands an answer." A fissure opened in the earth a few paces away, not wide, but deep enough that the air above it shimmered like heat over fire. From its depths rose light, green and gold and alive with motion. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat, calling, demanding. I knew instinctively that it was no ordinary rift, it was a manifestation of the unseen forces that had always moved beneath our lives. "It's a bond," the stranger whispered, eyes fixed on the light. "Between Dream, the forest, and the pack. And it's breaking." The truth struck me in waves. Dream had not simply guided us, he had bound us, woven our lives into this living tapestry that sustained the balance of the forest. His cryptic guidance, his interventions, even the trials, all of it had been part of a larger purpose. Now that purpose teetered on collapse, and I was standing at its center. "Luna," Dream said softly, his green eye glowing brighter, "to restore what was, something must be surrendered." My chest tightened. "What are you asking me to give?" His silence was answer enough. "Sacrifice. Not of blood, but of certainty, of trust, perhaps, or of the bond that had grown between myself and the stranger." My heart raced as realization dawned. One path would save the pack and sever what I had begun to feel, the other would protect him but unravel the very fabric of our world. The stranger turned to me, desperation flickering in his eyes. Don't do what he asks, he said quietly. Dream plays both sides. He always has. His words cut deep, their truth impossible to weigh. Dreams, I flared once more. I serve balance, not sides. The air crackled with tension, energy vibrating through the clearing until it became almost unbearable. I stood between them, the shadow and the light, the old and the new, trust and betrayal, and every instinct screamed that whichever choice I made, something vital would be lost. Lightning split the sky, striking the earth near the fissure with a blinding flash. The pack's cries echoed through the forest. I took a step forward, toward the light, then hesitated, caught by the stranger's voice calling my name, raw, pleading. Dream's gaze pinned me in place. Decide, Luna. The forest waits. Time slowed. The wind roared, the ground trembled, the light reached upward like a living thing. I closed my eyes, heart hammering, and stepped forward. And then, everything shattered. The light surged, swallowing the clearing in brilliance. The stranger shouted my name, his voice torn away by the wind. For a heartbeat, I saw Dream's face, calm, eternal, unreadable, before it, too, dissolved into the storm of light and shadow. The ground gave way beneath me, and the world tilted, spinning into weightlessness. My final breath caught somewhere between terror and faith, as if suspended on the edge of two realities. Then darkness closed in, and the forest went silent once more. I awoke to silence that felt both familiar and foreign, the forest around me shimmering with an unsteady glow as if the world itself were catching its breath after some unseen upheaval. My paws trembled as I rose, the earth beneath still vibrating with echoes of the fissure, the light, and the choices I had made, or that had been made for me. The pack was scattered, cautious, eyes wide with lingering fear, yet their trust lingered, fragile but present. I could feel it in the way they shifted closer when I moved, in the subtle alignment of their steps with mine. And above it all, I sensed Dream, his presence threading through the clearing like a living shadow, green eye gleaming in the filtered light, watching, waiting, assessing. The stranger was nowhere to be seen. My chest tightened at the thought, the absence of his steady presence both a wound and a reminder that some connections, even those forged in trust and courage, must bend under the weight of destiny. Yet even without him, I felt the depth of what had shifted between us, the silent bond of shared trials and unspoken truths. The forest seemed to pulse with memory, every leaf, every rustle, carrying fragments of what had been lost, and what could still be restored. It was in that quiet awareness that the enormity of my own role came crashing down. This was no longer a path of ordinary guidance, no longer a sequence of choices that affected only me. The fate of the pack, of the stranger, and of the forest itself rested in my instincts, my heart, and my resolve. Dream's form emerged gradually from the shadows, sleek and silent, glowing faintly green in the dim light, and I felt both awe and unease at his presence. He did not speak immediately, only watched, the weight of his observation pressing upon me like the tension in a taut bowstring. Then, in a voice that was not heard but felt, he spoke, "Destiny is a river, Luna. You may swim with it, resist it, or dive beneath it, but know that all waters shape the shore." His words rippled through my mind, and I realized that every step I had taken, every instinct I had followed, had been a movement along currents I had only begun to perceive. The river had always flowed, and now I was in its deepest eddy, forced to navigate both fear and desire, loyalty and freedom. I turned to the pack, seeing the younger wolves trembling near the roots of a great oak, the older ones standing with guarded vigilance, all of them bound together by trust one had nurtured and tested. Their eyes met mine, and I understood that leadership was no longer a role I simply held, it was a weight I could neither deny nor cast aside. The stranger's absence no longer filled me with longing alone, it became a lens through which I understood my own resilience, the quiet power of guidance without control, and the truth that sometimes love, loyalty, and destiny are measured not in proximity but in choices made when hearts are stretched across distance and uncertainty. A flash of green light caught my attention at the edge of the clearing. Dream's paw pressed into the moss, leaving an impression that seemed ordinary at first but then glowed faintly, as if marking the earth itself with the pulse of the unseen currents. I stepped closer, sensing the subtle significance. The message, though silent, was unmistakable. The path is yours, and yours alone. The forest waits only for clarity. The hum of his presence carried reassurance, yes, but also challenge. The final truth I had been avoiding, the realization that some bonds, some sacrifices, and some trust would be tested beyond the boundaries of desire, pressed against my chest like a living thing. The stranger appeared then, emerging from the mist beyond the ridge, eyes wide with both relief and unresolved tension. My heart leapt, but I could not move immediately. Between us lay the forest itself, bearing witness to what had passed, its trees bent as though in silent judgment. He approached slowly, cautious, aware that the trust between us had been strained by distance, by fear, and by the actions of the unseen. I could feel the weight of his emotions, layered and complex, mirrored in my own. We did not speak at first. Instead, we shared the quiet language of recognition, eyes meeting, breaths aligning, acknowledging that what had transpired was not simple and yet undeniable. Dream stepped into view, luminous and still, standing between us not as a barrier but as a reminder that forces greater than either of us had shaped this moment. His gaze flicked between the stranger and me, a slow, deliberate survey that seemed to measure understanding, loyalty, and readiness. Then he moved, not forward, not to intervene, but in a subtle, symbolic gesture, his head bowed slightly toward the fissure where the storm had begun, green eye glowing briefly as though acknowledging that the balance had been tested, the bond between all of us now irrevocably changed. All that is hidden may yet be seen, he whispered, and I understood that the forest, the pack, and even the stranger's fate were entwined in a pattern I could neither ignore nor escape. I knelt briefly by the fissure, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath my paws. Energy lingered there, a hum of life and consequence, a reminder that sacrifice was not always visible, that leadership required both strength and surrender. I felt my instincts sharpen, my heart open to the weight of trust, and a sense of purpose settled within me. I would guide the pack, honor the bonds I had formed, and navigate the currents of destiny with clarity, courage, and compassion. The stranger approached, placing a paw lightly near mine, the silent contact affirming a connection that could survive absence, fear, and the chaos of the forest. The pack drew closer, surrounding us with a quiet energy of shared resilience. Their eyes glimmered in the filtered light, reflecting not just loyalty but understanding, an acknowledgement that we had faced trials that tested the limits of courage and instinct, and yet emerged with a thread of unity intact. I sensed, too, that the bonds among us were deeper, shaped not by fear or compulsion, but by choice and trust, tempered through shared uncertainty. Dream lingered at the edge of the clearing, green eye fixed on us, form partially fading into shadow. Then, in one final, haunting act, he moved along the perimeter, pawing the earth lightly in patterns that seemed both ritual and warning, leaving marks that glowed faintly as the sun rose higher. His gaze met mine briefly, and I felt a pulse of understanding, a reminder that his role was eternal yet enigmatic. "The river flows on," he said, or I thought he said, and the words, ambiguous and weighty, lingered in the forest like a promise. I exhaled, a long, trembling breath, feeling the culmination of trials, loss, and discovery settle into my chest. The forest seemed to respond, leaves rustling as if acknowledging that the test was complete, at least for now. The stranger remained near, silent yet fully present, and the pack, cautiously watchful, now moved with a quiet alignment, their trust in me restored, strengthened by the shared crucible of events. And as the sun broke fully above the horizon, scattering light through the mist and illuminating Dream's lingering traces, I realized the truth. I was no longer simply Luna, guided by shadows and unseen hands. I had become a part of the forest's pulse, a steward of its balance, a leader whose decisions bore consequence not only for my pack, but for the currents of destiny themselves. I understood that love, loyalty, and courage were not measured in proximity or certainty, but in the clarity to act when everything uncertain threatened to overwhelm. The forest held its breath for a moment longer, and I felt a subtle shift in the wind, a closing gesture, yet a reminder that the journey was not over. Dream's form flickered once, green eye catching the light, before dissolving into shadow entirely, leaving me with the echo of his presence, the weight of choice, and the resonance of what had been learned. I rose fully, standing tall amidst the trees, chest heavy but steady, and understood that transformation had come not from conquest, not from triumph, but from the courage to face the currents of truth and destiny, alone yet never entirely separate. The forest awoke slowly, stretching into dawn with a light that seemed almost deliberate, as if the trees themselves were drawing in the lessons of the night and exhaling peace. Mist hung low over the river, curling like whispered memories of trials survived, bonds tested, and choices made. I walked through the clearing, paused silent on the soft, dew-laden earth, feeling every detail, the subtle pulse of life in the soil, the gentle sway of leaves overhead, the residual warmth of the pack gathered nearby. They moved with a quiet confidence now, eyes alert but calm, their bodies aligned not just with me but with one another, a testament to shared trials and the resilience of connection. It was a harmony born of tension, of uncertainty, and of courage, and I felt it ripple through my chest with the weight and clarity of understanding. The stranger stood at the edge of the ridge, watching the horizon. His posture was relaxed but vigilant, a quiet proof of endurance and trust that had been forged through adversity. I approached slowly, noting how the light of morning cast his form in gold and shadow, highlighting both strength and vulnerability. We exchanged no words immediately, they were unnecessary. Each of us understood the depth of what had transpired, the trials that had tested loyalty, the choices that had stretched hearts and instincts to their limits, the subtle guidance and persistent influence of forces unseen yet profoundly felt. The pack gathered near us, a living circle of trust and renewal, their energy quiet but steady, as if acknowledging that our journey had reached a point of balance, at least for now. Dream appeared last, emerging from the shadows as he always had, sleek and silent, his single green eye catching the first rays of sunlight. There was no urgency in his presence, no demand for attention, only a patient, measured awareness that reminded me once more of the role he had played in every turn of events. He circled the clearing slowly, leaving paw prints that glimmered faintly in green light before fading, like traces of lessons lived and mysteries endured. His gaze lingered on the pack, on the stranger, and finally on me, each look weighted with meaning I could not fully name. Then, almost imperceptibly, he lowered his head toward the horizon, and I felt the echo of a final line threading through the clearing: all that is hidden leaves a mark, and all that is chosen carries a legacy. The words resonated in my chest, a quiet confirmation that nothing had been wasted, that every decision, every instinct, and every act of courage had created a ripple that extended beyond the immediate. The forest itself seemed to respond, leaves shimmered in gentle light, water sparkled as though catching fragments of memory, and even the wind carried a note of serene acknowledgement. I understood then that Dream's role had always been greater than observer or guide. He had been the measure of consequence, the silent balance between risk and instinct, the force reminding us that destiny was not a gift freely given but a river to navigate with awareness and heart. I turned to the stranger, and for the first time since the trials began, our eyes met without hesitation, without tension. The shared history of challenge and survival hung between us, a bond tempered through uncertainty and strengthened by choice. He offered a subtle nod, and I felt the weight of gratitude, trust, and quiet understanding pass between us, a communication deeper than words. Together, we glanced at the pack, at their movements now fluid and confident, their unity evident in every subtle shift of body and gaze. I realized then that leadership was not command alone, nor was loyalty merely obedience. It was the cultivation of trust, the nurturing of instinct, and the courage to act with clarity even in the presence of uncertainty. Dream's form flickered briefly, shifting from shadow to light as the sun climbed higher, and then, almost imperceptibly, he began to retreat toward the edges of the forest. I felt his presence linger, not in form but in essence, like a memory of guidance etched into the very air. A faint glow remained in the paw prints he left, then faded, and finally, only the echo of a distant howl threaded through the trees, a sound that was at once farewell and promise. The forest seemed to hold its breath with that note, as if acknowledging that while the trials had ended, the influence of what had been endured would remain, quietly shaping the paths ahead. I walked slowly to the ridge, pausing to take in the landscape of the pack, the trees, and the horizon beyond. The sun rose fully, spilling gold across the leaves and river, a light that felt both blessing and testament. In that moment, I understood the full circle of what had transpired, the trials, the tests of loyalty and courage, the interventions of unseen forces, and the deepening of bonds between the pack, the stranger, and myself. The forest had demanded clarity, the currents of destiny had tested hearts, and yet, through all of it, trust and resilience had emerged as the true legacy of our journey. The stranger approached beside me, and for the first time, our steps were fully aligned, moving not out of necessity or fear but out of a shared understanding of what had been learned and what must continue. The pack followed naturally, their movements quiet but purposeful, a living testament to endurance, guidance, and the invisible threads that connect all within a circle of shared purpose. I felt the lingering pulse of Dream's presence in the shadows, a constant reminder that some forces are eternal, their influence subtle yet profound, shaping lives in ways both immediate and far-reaching. I closed my eyes briefly, inhaling the crisp air, letting the light of dawn fill my vision and settle in my chest. The forest was alive with calm, yet I sensed movement in the undercurrents of destiny, that unseen current that had carried us through every trial. Dream's green eye had left a mark not on the earth alone but on the consciousness of all who had witnessed, who had lived through the challenge, who had chosen with heart and instinct alike. I understood that the journey was not merely concluded, it had transformed me, the stranger, and the pack, leaving a legacy both subtle and enduring. When I opened my eyes, Dream was gone fully now, leaving no trace beyond the lingering glow of memory and the echo of his distant howl. Yet his presence remained, like a shadow within the sunlight, a pulse beneath the trees, a whisper threading through the wind. I knew that the river of destiny would continue to flow, carrying with it the lessons, bonds, and courage we had forged together. And as I looked at the horizon, at the sun spilling its light over the forest, at the pack moving in harmony around us, I felt the weight of fulfillment and the thrill of possibility coiling together like dawn mist. The story was ending, yet in its ending lay the promise of all that would come. Finally, I lifted my gaze to the rising sun, letting its warmth brush across my fur and the forest floor. A single leaf drifted from the tallest tree, swirling in the golden light before settling silently upon the earth. In that simple, poetic motion, I felt the essence of what had passed. The trials survived, the bonds deepened, the lessons learned, and I understood fully that the legacy of courage, trust, and unseen guidance would live on, carried in every heartbeat of the pack, in the whisper of the wind, and in the memory of a shadow who would always watch, always influence, and always remain a part of the story we had lived.